Can't.
I'm gonna die.
Thrilling, isn't it? The last time you probably saw me, I said I was gonna start doing some non-VN content, and I figured for the first one, let's ease our way in with one that's definitely an in-between. Zanki Zero fits all my personal requirements for a visual novel, as listed in What is My Visual Novel video, yet I don't really consider it one. I think I stopped thinking of it as a VN after the 10th time in 2 hours where I committed mass suicide by the beach. Hey everyone, some of you might be curious what is the difference between my Introduction to Recommended Visual Novel series, VN Primers, and these ones which will just be labeled as Zerian. For one, it'll be much more loose and less structured, where I'll just talk about the things I want to highlight about the game, anime, light novel, dating sim, whatever it is. 2. While I keep all my VNPs on a strict no spoiler basis, I might go into that here, although I will give a heads up if I do. And 3, not everything I show here is going to be a solid 10 out of 10 recommendation gold medal award from Zerian. Some of it might be good, and some of it might just be funny to talk about. Guess which one this is? Alright, let's get into it. Zanki Zero is the newest project from Sugawara Takayuki. Well, newest in quotations, it's like 6 months old by this point, but I put off making a video about it until now. He is famed for working on the game system for Danganronpa 1, and as a director for Danganronpa 2, and it clearly shows. Just look at the face of the main villains for the majority of the game, the sheep called Mirai, and the cartoon boy Sho. Sure, it ain't a cartoon talking bear or anything, but it's pretty close. The whole sense of humor and the vibe of the game with the morbid cartoon violence is also pretty dang similar. It is different though. It has a real-time combat that is every bit as goofy to play as you might imagine it would be. It has a story that was pretty interesting and mysterious, until they wrote themselves into a corner and had to BS their way out. Really, a lot of Zanki Zero can be chalked up to missed opportunities. It has many great ideas, where the theory sounds amazing, but the actual execution could have been a lot better. Honestly, the initial story was really intriguing. It's got a post-apocalyptic setting with a group of 8 characters stuck on this remote floating island called Garage Island. You find out quite quickly that every single one of them are actually clones of their previous self, and that each one of them have a lifespan of roughly 12 days where they go through the entire life cycle, from children to senile seniors. Even if they die, as long as they retrieve the X key from their belly button, they can be brought back to life with the arcade machine at the center of the main island. The overarching goal of the game, as introduced by Mirai and Sho, is to collect all the X parts for your Resurrection arcade machine, dubbed the Extend Machine. Zanki Zero has this whole retro arcade aesthetic to it. Not just the use of an arcade machine, but from all the pixel art for the items to the retro menus. It might just be personal preference whether you like it or not, but that one is right up my alley. The story itself is separated into chapters, with each chapter having a different island to explore, with a different main character whom you play from the perspective of. Each character is associated with one of the 7 cardinal sins, because, well, Japan really likes that concept. Off the top of your head, you can probably name at least 5 different game or shows that have used it. The characters are Haruto, the editor of Sloth, Rinko, the florist of lust, Ryo, the artist of envy, Yuma, the heiress of gluttony, Zen, the farmer of wrath, Minamo, the officer of pride, Mamoru, the doctor of greed, finally, Sachiko, the girl of the original sin. During the chapter, as you progress through the island, you also get to watch cartoon videos of the horrible things that happen to the current main character in their past and how it relates to their sin. Subject of these horrible incidents include physical abuse, sexual abuse, incest, neglect, emotional abuse, and abandonment, among a whole host of fun topics. In between learning more about each character, you also get to find out more about the overarching mystery of what happened. Aside from a great starting premise, what else does Zanki Zero have going for it initially? For one, the first-person dungeon crawling could work well with the creepy vibe they have going. While exploring ruined areas, at any time another monstrosity could pop up around the corner. They also managed to really make the aging clone story element as an integral part of the game, where as time passes while you explore, characters age rapidly. Characters of different ages have different strengths and weaknesses, which again is a pretty cool concept to balance alongside the whole hunger and toilet survival systems. This is combined with the RPG level up system where each character has unique passives, which you can rank up using points you get per level. Some which buffs character at specific ages, some that just work all the time. I also found the whole Shigabane system to be super fascinating at first, where anytime a character dies, you'll get a permanent buff for future resurrections, depending on how they died or what they did while they were alive. It makes it feel like the game is really paying attention to the actions you take. Finally, there is a superpower system involving parasites known as Cleones, which let your character use special powers for a limited number of times before dying. You'll notice by this point, I've repeatedly said, in theory, fascinating at first, and a cool concept, because in practice, everything kinda ends up dumb, stupid, or very disappointing. We'll start with everything I just mentioned and go backwards from there. So, first of all, Cleone powers, which the game makes a big deal out of and are one of the main things to collect. They are all exceedingly limited to like 4 uses before the character would just straight up die after using it. What's worse is that the attack ones usually end up weaker than just charge attacking. So really, outside of healing, I only ended up using it whenever the game forces you to break a specific barricade. Next is the Shigabane system, which in theory is really cool. Couple of issues with it, however. First, nearly every single Shigabane you get is a result of dying in a very specific way. Most of the Shigabanes actually fall under specific enemies, like resistant towards goats after dying to a goat. A goat, mind you, that will never appear after the first stage. What's worse is that you will never actually stumble upon the useful ones unless you seek them out. For instance, dying while overencumbered gives you the Shigabane for increasing carrying weight. You will never die over-encumbered, because if you are, you can't move, so you can't find an enemy to kill you. Dying from starvation increases maximum hunger gauge. Problem is that you'll probably die from an enemy attack or a trap 100 times before starvation is whatever causes your death. So on and so forth. The game also actively dissuades you from dying, as you're required to have all 8 members of your party before getting into any boss room. So if you don't want to backtrack, well, you better hope you kept everyone alive. But honestly, the Shigabane system has nothing on the age system, which is handled far worse than you can even imagine. Age progression is a central mechanic in Zanki Zero, and probably the biggest unique feature it has. A huge part of the level up system is focused on specific passives that give unique buffs that only activate when a character is a certain age cycle, like child or middle age. The problem here is that, straight up, none of this matters because half of the lifespan each character goes through is entirely worthless. The age cycle goes from child to adult to middle age and finally senior, where they die afterwards. Both child and senior are dead weight with stats that are essentially near zero. They can barely carry anything, have low stamina, like legitimately nothing good about them. No ability that you can put points in ever changes the fact that you don't want them in the active party. Another dumb aspect, at the start of every chapter, everyone's ages get randomly scrambled for the starting cutscenes. So like, some characters might literally be 2 days before death when you begin a chapter, which is just dumb. The smartest thing to do at the start of every single chapter is to go out and get everyone killed so you can return back and revive everyone for a fresh start. That shouldn't be a thing. There are also friendship events scattered throughout the level that can only be accessed when you have specific characters in your party at specific ages, like Minamo being a child while Mamoru is middle-aged. It's impossible for you to have that specific setup when you stumble upon the event, so every time you see one, you then have to kill off your entire party, revive the ones you need, pass the time to set up the age, then revive the other, get through all the monsters to see the event, then you realize you have to do this for every single friendship event in this whole stupid game. On another note, I think Zanki Zero is supposed to have horror elements? What with all the gruesome violence, dilapidated environments. If there was supposed to be a creepy vibe, it is pretty much ruined by the real-time combat being some of the goofiest nonsense ever. Don't get me wrong, I actually find it quite hilarious, but it certainly doesn't do any of the abominations you fight any justice. Finally, let's talk about the last part, which I didn't mention initially, the bond system. In theory, your bond level can increase through multiple ways. In practice, there's only one action that does anything. There are 4 levels of bonding: acquaintances, companions, friendship, and intimate. By the time I got to the final stage of the game, I only managed to have each character paired with another at the friendship level. While you can spend the entire game getting one bond level, a maxed out bedroom can also max the bond level in under a minute. As for the point in doing this, Well, there are in-game reasons, but the main reason is to see bond events. Bond events are these quick one-on-one conversations between characters, which you can think of as similar to Fire Emblem's support conversations. For what I can only assume is a dumb joke considering how it is portrayed, once you have reached a high enough level, you also get a sexy CG of each character, complete with sparkles which change depending on their age. And now I suppose I should mention the censorship for Zanki Zero outside of Japan. Long story short, they removed panty shots of Sachika and a child version of the Bond CG. My opinion of it? Sure, whatever. They're clearly meant as dumb jokes, but I agree it was a little weird, and if that's what's preventing the game from reaching an international audience, a joke that I barely knew existed until the end of the game, and one that literally has nothing to do with the plot, then yeah, take it out. You can still see the rest of them, including the old grandpa bodies if you need a chuckle. By now I imagine you know pretty much everything I liked in theory about the game, and everything I thought went wrong with its execution. If after hearing all that you still want to play Zanki Zero, well, first of all, wow, okay. But second, stop right here if you're scared of spoilers, because I'm gonna go all into it so I can express my disappointment at how hard they managed to screw up. Everybody scared of spoilers gone? Alright, cool. The reason why I was disappointed at plot, even though I initially was really hooked, is because Zanki Zero's last few hours of plot is pretty awful. So I talked about how the game has this great formula of new island, new main character, a new traumatic background to explore, while learning more about the underlying mystery. It starts out pretty tame with Haruto's past, where his article picture leaked by his news boss leads to a housewife getting stabbed by her ex-husband, but quickly escalates starting from the next chapter, with Zen, sickened by his family, beats his mother out of rage when he finds out that his grandfather is having blackmail sex with his mother and all the other women of the family. Worse yet, they don't let him hurt his grandfather as he's giving them money, and that he's a child of his mother and grandfather rather than his dad. And each past only gets worse from that point on. It's enticing for the reader to find out just what happened to each character. All the while, the snippets you learn of the main plot is genuinely exciting, with the introduction of Kurosuke after Minamo's dungeon being an incredibly chilling moment, where he gruesomely rips apart Sachika while the other characters can only watch, paralyzed by an unknown fear. It's a powerful scene, and gets you curious to know what happened to Sachika and the rest in the past. Who is this Kurosuke and how are they related? The point where the plot begins to fall apart, however, is during Ryo's dungeon, where both his dungeon and his past reveal are painfully short. Probably about a fourth of everyone thus far. While everyone's past is given a decent amount of time, Ryo's past is treated as a joke. All the other characters' bosses at the end of the dungeon was related to their past. Zen with his grandfather, Yuma where his mother and father fused together. Ryo is like 3 shark monsters that appear out of God knows where. This was probably done on purpose to shift the focus of the plot away from the characters to the underlying mystery, but it doesn't change the fact that it felt terrible to play and watch. The only part in the entire dungeon that is important is the plot reveal that every enemy you fight is actually a remnant of failed cloning. Story then picks up again with Rinko's dungeon, where the focus is mainly on everyone remembering about their shared past, and playing on the suspicion that Haruto might actually be the one responsible for murdering Sachika in the past, with Kurosuke being a failed clone of his. This one ends with a big reveal where you find out everyone aside from Mamoru used to play together as children, but then there was a horrible incident where Kurosuke locked them all up in the garage and forced them to blindly pick someone to die. Since Sachiko was the group leader, everyone thought she'd be a safe pick since no one would choose her, so they all ended up picking her. Unlike, Sachika who picked Kurobe. This leads into the next dungeon, where Mamoru reveals his past to the group, who follow him in the hopes of reviving Haruto, who is dead due to his X-Key being permanently destroyed. Here you find out that Mamoru was the one who had planned everything you have encountered thus far in some sort of overly elaborate revenge plot, using the research left behind by Dr. Terashima. Mamoru reveals that he is actually the half-older brother of Sachika, and when he found out about what really happened, decided to take revenge by kidnapping and using them for Dr. Terashima's human cloning experiment. You also get to learn more about Dr. Terashima, Mamoru and Sachika's father, as well as Super Eccentric Genius and Jesus Wannabe, who had a plan to evolve humans, which failed and destroyed humanity in the process. You also find out how Sachika, unlike the others, is an imperfect clone, which is why she has a completely different and more innocent personality than the super smart leader the original was. This then leads to a climactic showdown against Kurosuke, and finally Mamoru, who reveals that he plans on destroying their last hope of reviving Haruto, mostly to screw with them, but is stopped by Sachika revealing some of her old personality, like she did in the prologue to Haruto, which helps Mamoru realize that he does care about these new friends of his. Honestly, if Zanki Zero decided to wrap up by this point, I would have said Zanki Zero's overall plot was pretty solid. Every character had their chapter to shine, we have had the chance to explore each of their pasts, we have uncovered the mastermind behind what's going on, and finally defeated the main antagonist, Kurobe, in a final battle. Sure, it was kind of a weak boss fight for a climactic one, but they slapped on one or two more forms, I wouldn't have complained. The plot has basically been resolved with a happy ending for everyone, even if they're all still clones. Unfortunately, director and writer Sugawara Takayuki decided he wanted to have a climactic finale, leading to the last part of the game, which happens to be uninspired, generic, and some of the biggest nonsense I've ever witnessed. And not in the fun sort of way, but like in the bad, boring sort of way. The final chapter starts with Dr. Tereshima's lab connecting to Garage Island, which is odd since Mamoru up until this point was the one secretly doing that. Upon exploring it, Zanki Zero reveals that Dr. Terashima was actually hiding in Sachika's prosthetic arm this entire time. And the times that Sachika revealed her own personality was actually him taking over and acting. What? Also, the end of humanity was all actually a part of his plan, so he can rebuild it from scratch. As part of the plan, he also revived Mamoru first, so he could collect data maybe? I don't honestly know. Dr. Terashima then pops off Sachika's arm and scurries off into the lab. First of all, what kind of stupid idea? What? How does that even make any sense? He revived Mamoru years ago, just to watch him dick around for 10 plus years on his crazy revenge plot. Dr. Terashima could have just made his own crazy plot to gather data more efficiently. Why would he leave it to his son that he considered an idiot? The other thing that's terrible about this plot reveal is that doesn't this completely undermine Mamoru becoming friends with everyone, since he only did so after he saw some of the old personality in Sachika. Shouldn't he be the one most affected by this revelation? And yet he barely comments about it. The entire dungeon is a waste of time, where he just keeps on spouting about the evolving of humanity, which is absolutely the most generic final villain goal possible. The whole, we must save humanity by first destroying it because humans are flawed. Come on! Final boss is terrible and uninspired also. Everything after the final boss doesn't make any sense either. Sachika dies with her X-key being destroyed, but then through the power of magic sparkles becomes reborn as a human. They all then raise baby Sachika together until the extend machine breaks. And then the game tries to tie everything back to the stupid arcade game that they all played in the past. I thought pretty much the entire final dungeon sucked, and didn't really add anything or make any real sense. And what's worse, it ruined what was already an adequate conclusion to the story. It's a shame really, because I was actually enjoying the game for the most part. I mean, yeah, I still think the gameplay has a ton of faults, but I really dug the whole every character has got this interesting past to look back into. And the underlying mystery was great until they ruined it. So yeah, that was Zanki Zero, my new format. I hope you all really enjoyed it. I had a good time reminiscing about everything I remembered feeling about the game. All the frustrations, all the stupidity. As always, the like and subscribe and notification bell buttons are in the same place as always. And of course, as with anything new I do, I'll be working out the kinks in it as we go along. There'll be plenty more videos in this more loose and opinionated format, so hope you enjoy it. It will probably be less spoiler filled than this one was. Still here? Here are some of the other stuff I've done, and my Twitter is there where I post status updates, and what I'm playing in between videos. See you next time!